Welcome back to the Policy Viz podcast. I'm your host, Jon Schwabish. On this week's episode of the show, we turn to the new book from Darjan Hil and Nicole Lachenmeier, Modular Information Design Handbook, where they basically break down what most of us would call data viz encodings, so lines, bars, circles. They break that down to its core elements. So it's still a circle, but it's not just a circle in a dot plot or a bubble in a bubble chart. They break it down to, all the way down to a circle. What is a circle? What can it be used for? How can we combine them and modify them? How can we add color? How can we place them? And so the book is really interesting. The book is also beautiful, by the way. I mean, just great to hold. But the book is really interesting because it breaks data visualization, the idea or the practice of data visualization, all the way down to its component parts. You can sort of think about it as Leland Wilkinson's The Grammar of Graphics, not quite on steroids, but really getting all the way back to those core elements. And so I talked to Darjan and Nicole about their work, obviously when they are creating things for clients and all those sorts of things, but also where we focus most of our conversation on their workshops and how they work with people in this sort of analog way as they break all of these components down and then to build back up. And so it's a really interesting discussion to hear how they work with workshop participants and how they work with clients, especially in the sort of analog world where I think most of us are kind of itching to get back behind the computer and write some code or make something in any of the many data visualization tools that are out there. So it's a really fascinating conversation. If you are just getting into data visualization or you are thinking about how you can sort of expand your library or your creative process, I think this conversation is for you. I think the book is also for you because it can help you break things all the way back down to basics where you can then build up and expand what you'll ultimately present to your boss, your client, your audience, whatever it might be, because you can think more specifically in a more detailed way about these different visualizations. And as you're also going to hear, Darjan and Nicole talk about the difference between kind of fast thinking and slow thinking, not in the sort of Daniel Kahneman sort of way, but really in how we create our visualizations. We want to click, drag, make things, write some code, run the program, do it all really quickly, get things going, where really this slower process can help us think, can help us iterate, and ultimately help us create better products at the end of the day. So I think you're really going to like this conversation. So thanks again for listening to the podcast. Here's my conversation about the new book, Visualizing Complexity, Modular Information Design Handbook. Darjan, Nicole, great to see you in a room together, which is just kind of amazing for doing a virtual interview. This is great. I'm very excited to chat with you about your book, Modular Information Design Handbook. As I was saying before we turned on the recording, I hesitate to write in it or mark it because just the book itself is beautiful. So anyway, thanks for coming on the show. Excited to chat with you both.
Thank you.
Excited to be here.
Okay, so I want to start with introductions so people know who you are, and then I want to get right into this book. And I have a whole host of questions about the content, but also the book, the physical book itself, because like I said, it's just lovely to hold. But let's start with background and introduction. So Nicole, do you want to start just a little bit about
Sure.
yourself and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, so I'm a trained graphic designer. I studied in Basel in Switzerland. I'm like the co-founder of Superdot together with Darjan, and we are in our studio. So what you see in the background is our studio. Yeah, it's like Darjan and me, we met at a master's program in Basel, and I did some like data visualization and infographics before, and I was always interested how we could do like data design a bit more designy and less like technical. So that was kind of my research thing, and I also worked for a research project at the Basel School of Design back then when it was about city development and what we could do with like data and design there. So And Darjan had similar ideas, I think, when he came to the masters, and that's how. Then after that, we started our business together, and yeah, I think that's.
So did you guys start the business like right after your degree? Was that like once you met in doing the program, you're like, when we're done, like this is what we're gonna do?
Yeah, so actually, I think in the beginning, Diane did not want to work with me, but I wanted to work with him because I found because back then I was working with someone else. I had like a studio where we actually mainly designed like art books, and I loved that. But I thought, yeah, in the future, this is not so interesting anymore to do that for the next, I don't know, 20 years. So I wanted to
Right.
do something else in a more interdisciplinary environment, and I thought Diane would be a good partner. So we started a more like loose not team, not like a business, but more, how do you call it, that
Collective.
collective, yeah,
Collective.
if
In
you
German,
can
you
say,
would say collective.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
like a loose group of freelancers, just to with the idea to get some data with or data design projects, and then we see what comes from there. So that was the starting point. That was like 12 years ago.
Yeah. Now in the
Yeah,
13th. Yeah.
yeah.
What a naive idea, huh? In the beginning.
And Darjan,
Everybody knows.
what's your background?
Yeah. So I finished masters in business informatics in Vienna. So I was more in this IT software development area,
Right.
working for IBM, and then I got actually a very well paid job in a Swiss bank. So actually, that's how I landed in Switzerland, in
Mm-hmm.
Zurich. And at some point, I just thought, okay, business and like business life and the way how meetings go could be probably more efficient based on kind of more visual based decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and that's actually how this second career came together, so that we actually studied then in the master's program, which was kind of the first year launch. So it was for both of us something new. This
Mm-hmm.
was called visual communication and iconic research.
Mm.
And we were the first generation. So actually, really in that program, we had time, and we were both working next to studying, and we had kind of this really, at some point, idea to start, to start something in the information design area,
Right.
not knowing how that business model actually would look like. And everybody
Mm-hmm.
knows it's not the easiest business
Yeah.
model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be a great topic too, right?
Yeah.
To talk about
Yeah.
business
Let's talk about
models.
business.
How do we
Yeah.
do it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting though about this book is that a lot of it feels um, about the process of designing, of creating a visualization. And so I was hoping there's kind of two parts. I want to make sure that folks know that are listening. So uh, what does the book do? What is the point of the book? And then also just sort of like generally, how do you define modular information design, which is the name of the book? So like how do these what is this, and how does it play out in your work?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe we can start with a bit the background why we were
Yeah.
writing the book at all. Because we realized after a while in practice that we have a very maybe unique or very certain way of doing data design, and then we also find out that it's quite hard to explain to new like staff members to tell them how we actually work and what our approach is.
Mm-hmm.
And then after some years, we also had the opportunity to teach at the design school in Switzerland. Also, like information visualization aesthetics, something like that. And then
Mm-hmm.
we realized, oof, this is actually not an easy process. So I said, how
Yeah.
can we make it, more accessible for, like in the first hand, for designers back then, to really like show them that data is also a material to design with, and it's not
Mm.
just a technical
sort of functional question
discipline.
also. Yeah.
It's not just a functional like right and wrong, but you can also design with data and do it like step by step,
And
as
play.
if and play as like you do it with other elements in design. Because we had in Basel at the school, we in the first year you do all these basic exercises that are in the beginning. You think I want to do like poster design, and this is not so interesting, but you have to do for days. You have to do really basic exercises just with black and white and that stuff, and then you realize, oh, this is really really cool to really understand the process. So we thought, how can we bring back that to data design so it gets a bit more playful? So
yeah. So
that was,
to maybe to add kind of as I've been coming from the business and kind of more this software direction. So I was really like, okay, come on, let's do this on the computer, let's be fast and so on. And what I actually had to learn here in Switzerland, in the school, and especially in the design education, is that kind of there is no fast. So you have to sit down, and actually the exercises you get in school are so basic that you're like, okay, are we here in the middle age? But actually you realize by working really by hand and just like with black and white, and maybe the teacher is asking you to create different variations of 5 lines not connecting. So kind of what can you do with that? And then you're like, hey, why should I do it? What does it make sense? But actually, and then you're like, after 5 minutes, you think you're done. And then they like, okay, no, we're gonna do this for 5 days. And that is actually training you to really think around the corner, and that needs time. And then actually you realize that approach lets you think about the concept itself, the meaning, like, does it make sense what I'm doing? And this is so strong that actually we realize that, yes, next to all the valuable books and approaches in the data visualization field, the way we work with this kind of super basic thinking on the core elements, like, are we talking here about color, or are we talking here about that something is circular? So kind of we are really trying to take apart the discussion, the literacy, the discussion on it. What are we here talking about? Or especially if you talk with clients and you get a critique, so they criticize something, then you have to find out, what level are we talking about? Are you criticizing now the color? Are you criticizing the content? Are you criticizing the mathematical calculation behind? What are you talking about? So in order to have that kind of really precise way, we at some point we decided to say, okay, we have to somehow try to take the system apart, as we do that in design, as we learned that in design. Let's apply that mindset to data visualization, to diagrams, and to information design.
Right. So you've broken it down in the book, you've broken it all the way down to, I want to say encodings, but it's even kind of even more basic than that. Because I think when people think visual encodings, they think line and a line chart, as opposed to a line that, something that connects 2 points. You've really broken it all the way down. So I want to get to the client work and how you, to this point, Darjan, about like people in a room who are probably used to working on a computer, and you're forcing them to draw and work with cards and post-it notes, and like whether that, how that works. But talk to me about the book itself, and how you hope people will use, because each page is like a different, again, I'm going to use the word encoding, but I'm going to use that loosely because I mean, maybe you have a different word, but
no, it's correct.
Each page is sort of a different encoding.
We use the same.
Coding and decoding, encoding.
Okay.
So basically that's actually a very big hurdle, especially in today's world, where everybody has the feeling, even with now GPT and all the things, that we can be even faster and faster and more like. So that's in every day, and in that kind of every new client relationship, but also with the relationship with students, it's kind of this first moment we need to explain ourselves why it is important for us to just take out the pace, take out the speed, and kind of go back to this thing which is called paper, and try to sketch again. And then the people are like, yeah, I'm not the drawing type of person, I cannot draw, and all these things come up. And then you're like, yeah, I know, me neither. So I'm also not the biggest, like, but still a line or kind of a box or something we can do.
Yeah.
And then we can also, as soon as they do that, we say, okay, are you using color? And then we can ask, okay, why did you use color here? And what does the color stand for? Or do you want to try to use pattern instead of color?
Mm-hmm.
So we are there step by step, trying to really make out of that hurdle is, on the other hand, a potential, because people have that resistance that I don't want to do it. So actually they do it very efficient. So actually, because
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to draw, you try to do it very efficient. And that's
Mm.
actually quite a good point in this process. And then there is this magical moment when the class or people have more than one hand drawn piece of paper somewhere, and we
Mm.
put them all next to each other. And then you realize that you have, I don't know, 30 different ways to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And before, there was maybe 5 ways to solve the problem in Microsoft Excel. So
Yeah.
actually, you're like, okay, this is now getting interesting. And that's kind of this icebreaker situation where people see, okay, this is a process. This is kind of something that needs time. It's actually inviting because people start chatting with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And there is this kind of, let's do this atmosphere, like kind of, okay,
Yeah.
let's do the next one, like what is
Yeah.
happening next.
Yeah.
So that's really helping, because before, in the meetings, we tried to be very fast with our clients also, and we just realized that then we have discussions or critique. We got critique where we were not sure, is this because we used the wrong color? Was it because we missed the topic? Was it that the concept is bad? So actually, we try to take that apart, and
Mm-hmm.
as we stay for a long time on paper, in order to clarify that we really all together got the topic right, the concept is right, the diagram is right, the visual language is right, and then we go into the digital.
Yeah. So Nicole, as a designer, I want to ask you, because
Yeah.
you mentioned something that's so funny, like I can't draw, right? Like I say that all the time because like I feel like, but like every designer I talk to is like everybody can draw. So like when you are
Everybody
working,
can draw.
right, yeah, when you're working with people, like how when they say I can't draw, I can't sketch, like how do you help them over that hump, over that block?
Yeah, I mean, when we do workshops, we give them like a nice paper and
Mm-hmm.
maybe the similar set of pens, and so they see what the others are doing, right?
Stencils.
Yeah, maybe a stencil or the
Oh,
ruler, so they can work
yeah,
with rulers as well. So if they don't want to do like hand drawn stuff, so
right.
yeah, I think that's working pretty well,
Do
and
do
yeah,
you
and it's engaging.
Yeah, and do you think it having this idea sort of behind all this, that eventually I'm going to be using data, do you think that helps people? I'm always curious about, because I'm certainly put myself in this camp of like more like the quantitative data side rather than the art design side, and that's always that barrier. But I wonder whether you say to someone, "Hey, we're going to draw," but in the background there's data, like that's where you're comfortable, and I wonder if that helps people get over this hump of like I can't draw, but I do know data. Um,
Yeah, it's like
yeah,
exactly that connection from the table to the design.
yeah,
So yeah, you mentioned chart chooser before. So
yeah.
as we work maybe less with chart choosers. I mean, they're fine. It's and interesting and a good approach. But for us, it's like through doing that by hand to working with the data by hand, you actually realize you 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 understand the also like the standard charts much better. So this is also maybe one of the aims in the end, not to say, okay, with this drawing it's like art and then make the most beautiful sketch and mine is more beautiful than yours. So it's actually maybe through drawing you understand this process from data, what happens from the table with the raw data to the visualization, no matter
Mm-hmm.
if it's like a regular bar chart or pie chart or fancy like data art stuff, you know. So
Right.
like this connection from data to the
Maybe
to the product.
maybe I add someone.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you said understanding, kind of understanding of the diagram, but the other thing is also that kind of we are not suggesting a new alternative to data analysis, like explorative analysis with tools that you do with big data and so on. That's
Right.
not
Right.
actually what we. So that world, it's good as it is. So
Yeah.
I think calculating, finding patterns, and so on. That's one thing. The other is that you say, okay, how can I bring this to the audience? How can I kind of translate it? How can I invite people to look at my findings? So actually, if you say, I have my findings, I'm fine with that, you don't need to do that. So you find your pattern and everything, it's good. But if you say, okay, I want to bring it to a wider audience, then maybe it gets interesting to say, okay, and that's actually the part where we say, okay, then take out a little, because you don't need big data to do that. So kind of take out little, maybe a minimum, an average, and a maximum country or something. So kind of take out some little pieces out of that big table, so which is representing the idea, and then let's try on that little scale, of that little amount, to draw things. And the interesting point is that through drawing, you actually, because it's slow and you don't want to do that, you start thinking still about your data and the concept. And very often the process is that people, through doing it, they actually understand the data in a new way. So actually that's coming then back again to that explorative part.
Right. Do you find a difference between working with a group that people are from all different walks of life and kind of a more public kind of workshop versus when you're working with a team in within a particular specific company, or with they are their own team? Like, do you find that people work together and interact in different ways when they know each other versus when they're part of a team, and a
Yeah, that's
pre-existing
for
team?
you. That's for
Um,
you to answer.
yeah, I would say, I would answer with a fast no, because
Yeah.
we did like workshops where we had representatives from all over Europe coming together at the Federal Statistics Department, having 3-day workshop on data visualization. So they were statisticians coming from all everywhere, never worked before, but as soon as there were the sketches on the table, they started talking to each other and said, "Oh, this is actually an interesting approach. Why did you do that?" So actually, it was a
Yeah.
conversation starter. And
Right.
the same thing happens if the people know each other very well in the team, and we go to a certain company and they want to do the workshop. Actually, I would say the same thing happens. So it's very, it's similar. It's similar.
Interesting.
Yeah, and also there's also a connection to the chart chooser again, because when you have a lot of variations, you can start to discuss which option would fit that data best, or
Yeah.
I mean, depending on the target that you have, of course, but you have this selection where you can choose from, and it's not like one chart is right and the other one is wrong. Maybe, I mean,
Right.
depends on the data, but you can also see what doesn't work, not just what is working, you know. So
Yeah.
you have this variation and you can look at it and then discuss and decide, and like this also learning to decide when you are using other tools like, I don't know, Excel, Tableau, whatever. It doesn't matter for us. Also
Yeah.
there you have to be able to make decisions. So I
Hmm.
think that modular information design can help you
Yeah.
finding that decision.
Yeah. I have sort of a complicated relationship with the chart chooser. I mean, I have my own, but I
Hmm.
also feel like the phrase chart chooser is uh complicated. As you said, it's not like like there's an answer. Like, none of these are an answer. It is just a variations, or just opportunities that you can use. um but again, your work boils that down even further, right? Because I think the chart
Mm,
choosers would say, okay, scatter plot, dot plot, bubble chart, but you break that down even further into, here is a circle, here is a circle with a variation on the circle itself. And so, do you find as you're working with folks that, again, to your point about this fast versus slow, which I really love that idea. Do you find that people want to move really fast? They're like, oh, circle, okay, I'll make a scatter plot, but then you have to pull and rein them back in. Like
Exactly.
you find that? Yeah.
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 Exactly. That's how it works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. But I always say that for the first sketches, you also have to do that. You know, you have to do the bar chart or the
Yeah.
scatter plot just to do it, and then you can move from there. You know, so but
Right.
you can relate to the other basic chart. But
Yeah.
Right.
in general, you can with our elements, you could build all the standard charts. You know, it's just
Right.
broken down
It's a
even more.
combination. Yeah.
It's a yeah, it's a
Yeah.
combination of the elements, but you can build everything.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's also
And that
interesting
makes it.
when
Yeah.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Sorry. No,
I
and
was
that kind
just
of. Yeah. Okay.
we'll get
Okay.
it.
Good.
We'll get it. Go ahead.
No. It's just that kind of, and that makes it actually the system also complicated and kind of
Mm.
it's advanced. So
Right.
because it's so elemental, people who are not used to work with different diagram types and haven't seen different diagram types, for
Mhm.
them to say there
Mm.
is a beauty that kind of taking it apart into the little into the smallest piece, it's kind of whoa, it's kind of two big signs. It's like
Right.
why should I
Mm.
do that? And so
Yeah.
actually we just discovered those. So we thought when we brought out modular information design that, oh, this is so easy, it's so simple, it's for everyone. And then we
Yeah.
realized, okay, actually people have more advantage if they are not beginners. So yeah.
Oh, right. Well, it's interesting because every part of a graph can be broken down, right? I think a lot
Yeah.
of people
Mm.
think about, I do this exercise where you show them a graph and they see the line chart, the line goes up and then it comes down, but they miss the fact that all the labels and the axis lines and the tick marks and like all that stuff are things that you can control. And the way you have set this up is you've broken that all the way down to its core elements of each mark, as it were, is its own thing in the space.
Exactly. It's each is a one component you can think about. Yeah.
Mm.
Right. And
Yeah.
how do you then at the end of the workshop, the end of the day, you've got people have pencils and markers and paper all over the place, which sounds amazing. How do you um how do you help them to the next step, which is they're going to go back to work the next day and they're going to have to implement this, and they're probably right back behind the computer. So how do you help them bridge that last part?
Yeah. So in this, that's mostly when people are coming for kind of further education situation that kind of they
Mm-hmm.
are working somewhere. As students, it's easier. But kind of
Yeah.
really, if people are from professional side, then they're like, okay, how should I do that next day? And
Mm-hmm.
then normally discussion goes into the direction that you say, okay, maybe, I mean, there is no tool, not yet, which is doing this kind of super elementary combination.
Yeah.
Um, but if people go back to their everyday business and they are more conscious on the choice,
Mm-hmm.
be it in Excel, let's talk because the Excel is the most simple thing,
Sure.
but they are aware why they use the line and they are aware that they are not just using all color palettes, but they use maybe red for present and dark red for the future. No,
Mm-hmm.
like let's say
Mm.
light red for future because it's
Mm-hmm.
blurry, and the dark for the past, so
Mm-hmm.
that you have already little changes inside which make the whole thing more readable. Then we say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, mission achieved.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I think it's about like data literacy and everyday use of charts, and also from it, always I'm saying learning to see, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
looking at things more carefully, and I think already that helps you to find decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I want to come back to the book specifically because, like I said at the front, it is just lovely to hold, and why I haven't marked it up and folded all the pages and everything. But so can you tell me, can you just tell me about the process of writing the book, and um, not just like page by page, but like, when you started talking to publishers about like actually like doing this, like what was that like? Were you like, we're going to lay this book out where we want this kind of page, paper type? I mean, I can imagine just looking at your studio behind you that, you what kind of paper you want. So what was the whole, that whole process like?
You know?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was not, since this is our first like book, we did not know exactly when to approach a publisher, so how much do
Mm-hmm.
we need to have? And we had like this process where we were like drawing, of course, and all the pages, or all the diagrams, and then also, I mean, all the elements, we were drawing them step by step by hand, and we were making notes also by hand. And then we started to put the system together, and we discussed a lot how the system could work. So it was, what I want to say with that is that it's not like we wrote all the text and then we added the images, or or
Mm-hmm.
we found the images. So it was like next to each other, like writing at the same time as still designing the system and
Mm-hmm.
developing the system. So it was like more hand in hand, which I think was not easy for the publisher in the end because we had to, I think we
Yeah.
had like this format, I don't know, PDF
Yeah.
or something,
Yeah.
where everything was in one. And we thought,
Yeah. It's
for
all
the
like lined
publisher,
up, right?
is great to see already the visual, because you cannot understand the visual without the text.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the text, you
Proofreading was
cannot
a,
understand
yeah.
the text without the visual. That's maybe
Yeah.
more important.
And were
Yeah.
you in that process? Were you also? I assume that you were also teaching and obviously doing work and teaching and doing workshops. Like, were you sort of, as you were teaching and learning, seeing things that worked and didn't work? Was that feeding back into the book itself?
Yeah.
Like, was it all this like mess of everything happening at the same time?
Exactly. It was
Yeah.
a constant, I mean, we had a constant discussion and restructuring. I mean, the whole system, I think we have redone it 4 times. So kind of,
Mm-hmm.
we thought it's
Hmm.
done. The next day, Nicole comes and said, actually, I think that doesn't work. So actually, then we
Or
started
it's too
again and
complicated.
again. And at some point, we were like, okay, now listen, I think we have to finish it now. And we, at some point, we really had this, the whole book in hand drawings, like just
Hmm.
stapled together. And
Right.
then we're like, okay, I think this is good enough. Let's send this to the publisher. And then we
Yeah.
asked 6 publishers, and we're like, okay, probably none of them will answer. And actually, 5 of them answered
Oh
positively that
wow.
they would bring it out. So we're like,
Wow.
okay, okay, good, because
Yeah.
we had this blueprint. That was the
Right.
blueprint of the book. Yeah.
Right. And so from there, how um did you, when you were choosing between these, I mean, that's amazing. They had five publishers interested. Were you, and given again that this is your first book, you kind of learn over time like what you're looking for, but
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
were you looking for a publisher that would help you build the physical book that you wanted it to look and feel like? Was that your like first concern? Or did you want like someone who would really edit the book? Like, what were you looking? I'm curious what you were just looking for.
Yeah. I think.
I think more like a partner to edit like the content and to have like another perspective.
Yeah.
Because as I said, I was a like book designer before. I did artist books, so I had this clear idea in mind that I wanted to do a kind of a design book
Yeah.
for about data. So it
Right.
had to come like really. There was no other way that we would have designed it ourselves, because it's so close together, like the content and the design. I could never have given it to someone else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
And
had to be Nico. So kind of publisher choice was who is allowing us to do everything ourselves.
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. And then like of course you find compromises, because the publisher says, okay, we are always like using that paper, and you can choose
Yeah.
from this one or the other one, and we are working with this printing company that you cannot choose, and how many copies that are printed you cannot decide on that. But like, yeah,
Design wise.
design wise, yeah, I could.
It was all
We
Nicole. It was
were
all you.
no, we were lucky that we could decide.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
No, was
that
good.
is fantastic. Yeah. I mean, that's what you need. And when folks come in for a workshop, do they work from the book, or because for folks who don't know, who don't have the book, which they, for listeners who don't know, they don't have the book, they should. There's a fold out poster, and I can see it on your wall there. There's a fold out poster that comes with it. But I'm curious, when people come to the workshop, do they work from the book itself, or is that like something you give them later, or is that just like, it's just, this is just the model for how you teach it, but the book isn't like in the class? So how do you yeah, I mean, I guess, how does that work?
Yeah, actually, we're quite flexible. So normally, different university programs, they ask us that the book is kind of must not be the like condition for the workshop. So kind of we start from that point that people don't have the book. Sometimes people say, yeah, I would like to have the book, or they already ordered the book. That's very good. We start or we build up the whole workshop by bringing and projecting all the elements, showing, and that's why there is this kind of summary poster having all the elements. And so we do that step by step. And if people want to have the book, it's amazing. If they want to have only the poster, it's also good. And if they want to have none of that, it's also okay, because we are providing the information during the workshop.
Sure. Well, I love it. I think it's great. I think you've broken down the core elements, and I think it's terrific for, especially for people who are just getting their feet into this field. And the last thing I wanted to ask you is on that topic of, how do you think about folks who at least think they're more advanced in data visualization, right? Like, we all think we're great at what we do, right? But like, for those folks who might come in and say, I code in R or JavaScript, I don't know, like how do you work with those folks? You kind of like, do you feel like you need to break them down and then build them back up again?
The funny thing is that I had a workshop with people who at the university, with some scientists that they are working with R mostly, and they said, "Oh, this concept it's really familiar to me, because like this is also kind of how R works, and I can really relate to it." So they that was we didn't know that before, because we don't work with R, but yeah, that was cool to know. So we are still getting feedback or collecting feedback. So everyone who wants to add something, we are happy to know about how people using the books, and because for us it was also an experiment.
Right. So before we go, where I'll put links to the book, obviously, and you had this really cool post on LinkedIn that had pictures from a workshop, so I'll put all that. But where can folks find you? How can they get involved in one of these workshops? Like, where can folks find you both?
So super.studio, that's the address. From the company, they can write us, they can find us, but like, we have personal profiles on LinkedIn and Instagram. We're happy to connect with people. We are in Switzerland, in Basel, open to chat, open for feedback. And also, if people are interested, we have also a little format what we started in Vienna and Switzerland, and it got online. It was called On Data and Design, where also we invite people from the field, sharing more the visual part, the images of the practice and how they work and how they use data in a creative way. So actually, also we're On Data and Design, they can approach us. So the book should be available everywhere. We hope it's still available. And yeah, so yeah,
that's terrific. Well, I'll put links to all that. Folks should definitely check it out. So it's Visualizing Complexity, Modular Information Design Handbook by Darjan Hil and Nicole Lachenmeier. Thank you both so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Great chatting with you.
Thank you for having us.
It was great fun. Thanks.
Yeah, it's cool.
Thanks to everyone for tuning into this week's episode of the show. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you'll take a couple of minutes and check out the book. I put the links to the Superdot Studio and to the book and a few other things in the show notes to this episode. I also hope you will take just a moment to rate or review the podcast. It really helps me find new guests, broaden the reach of the show, and improve how lots of people visualize their content. If you'd like to check out my work, you should head over to policyviz.com if you're interested in moving your data visualization skills to the next level. I've got a lot of books that I've written on data visualization, on presentation skills, on making data visualizations in Excel. Lots of great stuff over there at policyviz.com. So until next time, this has been the PolicyViz podcast. Thanks so much for listening.